everyone, welcome back to my channel. Hello if you're new here. My name's Holly, and if you don't already know, I am currently 15 weeks pregnant when filming this. So I thought that in this video I would just talk about and go through kind of like my first trimester experience and symptoms and, you know, everything that has happened during this time and how I've been feeling. This is my first pregnancy, so it's obviously all very new, and I really enjoyed watching these videos before I was pregnant and in my first trimester, because it's so kind of such a new experience and you don't know what to expect. I really enjoyed watching these videos to kind of settle my nerves and kind of see other people's experiences. Also, I thought this would be really nice for me to look back on in months and years to come, when baby's here, so I can remember what it's like, because so many people have said to me, you know, it obviously is such a big thing and it consumes you now, but when you know, once you've had your baby, it's really easy to kind of forget. So I thought this would be nice to document and for me to kind of come back and look at it in the future. So excuse the room, this is currently my sort of beauty filming room, but it is going to be the nursery, so it's a little bit higgledy-piggledy at the moment. I've kind of tried to make the background as nice as possible, but it is just an absolute mess everywhere else. But this will then be the nursery, so that's why it's all in a little bit of disarray. But if you're interested, then keep watching, and I hope you enjoy the video. So I've got my little diary here. This is what I've been keeping notes in kind of like the whole way through my pregnancy. I started off initially keeping a video diary, just sort of for myself to view and just to kind of vent. I started this actually when we were trying to conceive, so it was just a way for me to get my feelings out. We hadn't actually told anybody that we were trying to conceive, and it was also being in like kind of the pandemic and lockdown and things like that, it at times felt quite lonely. Even though Tom and I were really open with each other, there was sometimes the feelings of, you know, not being able to talk to other people, so it was nice to actually be able to talk to the camera, and also, again, like I said previously, just to look back on and remember all those feelings from before, and obviously now we're pregnant, kind of the journey that we went on to get to this point. So I would really recommend that if you're trying to conceive or pregnant. My mum said to me that when she had me and my sister, she started writing a diary when we were younger to kind of track everything and just remember to look back on, and we've looked back on them and they're lovely to read. But she said to me that she didn't do it when she was pregnant, and actually she would have loved to have done that. So that's what I've done. So every time I turn another week, so once I'm on a Wednesday, every time I turn another week, I just do one sort of diary entry. Sometimes it can be like half a page, sometimes it can be a full page, and this has kind of been my pregnancy diary. So I've got all my notes in here to refer back to, so I can make sure I've included everything in this video and in my first trimester. So if I keep looking down here, that's why. So I'm just going to start from the beginning. We found out that we were pregnant at around 4 weeks, so really quite early on. My cycle tends to be a little bit shorter. I was kind of tracking my periods on a few apps on my phone, and typically sort of every woman's cycle is different, but they kind of track it, and typically it's kind of like 28 days, but my cycles were a lot shorter, between like 21 and 24 days. So when I found out I was pregnant, I found out quite early because I was due on my period sooner than maybe what some women are. And that is why I found out, I think that's probably why I found out a little bit earlier on. And obviously we were actively trying, so it's something that I was really kind of focused on, and I was, like I said, tracking my periods and everything like that. The day I found out was the day I was actually due on my period, and the reason kind of I knew that because, like I said, I was using apps on my phone. The two apps that I used that I'm going to mention was Ovia Fertility, which was the one I initially used and was brilliant. You kind of put all your information in, you can kind of edit how long your cycles are and things like that, so that's really helpful if you have like a longer or shorter cycle. I mean, my cycles are typically quite regular, they would never go past the 24-day mark. Sometimes they were, like I said, sometimes more 21, so a little bit earlier. But the majority of the time it was between that. I never really went longer than 24 days of a cycle. So I was using that app. I then joined a Facebook group for sort of like first time mums trying to conceive, and I found that really useful. They also, everybody on there was kind of talking about this pre-mum app, which I also downloaded and used that. So I was kind of using those two apps together, and with my information put in, they both kind of typically said when I was due on my period. They kind of were all both synced up. So I just enjoyed using both apps. The one with the pre-mum app, the reason why I went to use that was because initially I wasn't ovulation testing at all. I just was letting the app predict kind of like my fertile window. It kind of gives you 5 days of a fertile window, and I just was using that. But the month we actually conceived, I was using ovulation testing strips. Now, with the pre-mum app, you can actually take photos of your test strips, and it can then see, it basically can read the tests, so it can input them and it can show you your LH peak. So that's why I then went to use that test. You can manually input it on the Ovia app, I think, sort of when you've ovulated. If you've taken tests and you've got your peak LH, you can then put it in there. So you can also do it that way. But with the pre-mum app, you just take the picture and it does it automatically. And if it doesn't pick it up correctly, you can then manually enter it as well. So that was the app I was using. Initially, I was using some just ovulation strips that I got from Amazon. And you can get the pre-mum ones, but I just used some cheap ones from Amazon. I was then worried because I wasn't having sort of any results. You're supposed to get basically 2 lines on those, your control line and your test line. You're always supposed to have both, but your control line, when that's darker or darker than your test line, is when you're at your peak. But I wasn't getting any readings on that line, so I was just assuming the tests weren't working. So I then went and bought the Clearblue ovulation tests. Now, these are a lot more expensive, but they're like a digital version. So you have the strip and you insert it into like a digital reader. So it is a lot simpler because it kind of gives you like, I think it was, I don't know if this is right, but I think a circle was you're not ovulating. A smiley face was you're kind of gaining up to your peak, and then when it was a flashing smiling face, that was when you were ovulating, and it was kind of like green light, go. So initially when I used those Clearblue tests, I was just getting circles, and I was thinking, I'm not ovulating, what's happening here? But all of a sudden, from one day I went from a circle to the next day a smiley flashing face. And I then did use those strips that I had previously had from Amazon on that day, and the lines, I did have 2 lines, and it was darker than it had ever been on a reading before. So I think, just me personally, my peak just surges really, really quickly, whereas some people it kind of builds up over days, and that's what I was searching for. But that didn't actually happen for me. When using the apps as well, they obviously predict when you ovulate and they give you a 5-day window. But when I actually did the ovulation testing, it didn't quite marry up. So I think in a way as well, that might be because my body just ovulates differently to what the app predicts. Again, this is just like an average prediction, and it's kind of, every person's different, and every woman ovulates at different times in their cycles. It's just, I was obviously different. So for me to then use the ovulation sticks just gave me that exact time and definite answer. So the month we conceived, I used ovulation testing, whereas previous months I hadn't. So I think that really, really helped us conceive that month because we had a correct reading of when I was ovulating. As I said, that month we found out I was around 4 weeks. Now that day I tested because I was waiting for my period. Now both my apps said I was due on my period that day, and previous months I had tested before I was due on my period. So I actually was using what are they called? The first response tests. I'd kind of done some research with best pregnancy tests, and they had come up as being the most reliable and most sensitive sort of early on, and it kind of says on the packet you can test like six days before your missed period. So some cycles I was testing probably 5 days before I was due on my period, obviously getting negatives, which then doesn't particularly make anything clearer, because it could just be that you're testing too early and you haven't got enough of those hormones for the test to pick it up. So you are then still just waiting for your period. Other times I didn't even get a chance to test, because I was like, right, I'll wait sort of 3 or 4 days before I'm due on my period, and my period would come earlier, so it would come around the 21 day of my cycle rather than the 24. So at times I didn't even get to the point of testing. So this cycle I was like, right, I am not going to test early. I will wait to see if my period comes. If it doesn't, I will then test. So like I said, on this day I was due on the Saturday, and I waited until the Saturday to test, which is hard because all you want to do is test, or all I wanted to do anyway was test. But I knew that even if I did, it might not give me the answer, a concrete answer anyway. So I waited until the Saturday morning. I was due on my period, and normally a day or two before I have signs of coming on my period, and I didn't. So I was awake really early that morning, and I just thought, right, I'm going to test. So I did the test, and I turned it over and I left it for 3 minutes, and when I turned it over there was 2 really strong lines. So there was no way that it was kind of like, is it, isn't it? Because I'd waited, I had 2 lines that were definite, and I think that really helped me that month, because I wasn't stressing out as much, oh, I need to test early. I waited until I actually needed to test, because if my period came, I didn't need to test and I knew the answer anyway. So obviously I was actually really shocked, absolutely over the moon and so happy. And even though this is obviously what we've been working for and what we wanted, actually getting those 2 lines and it being a positive really it really did shock me. And I was kind of like, it took a while for it to sink in, definitely. I remember actually, it's so strange, because I'd had dreams before about finding out I was pregnant and being pregnant, and I remember once I'd done the test and it was positive, I went downstairs and made myself and Tom a cup of tea. At this point Tom was still in bed, and I was just kind of sitting there making my cup of tea, and I was just thinking, is this real? And I actually had to physically pinch myself, because I just didn't believe that it was real. I thought maybe this is a dream, because dreams can feel so realistic. But no, I wasn't dreaming, and it was definitely a positive test. Once I then told Tom, he was half asleep when I woke him up and told him with a cup of tea, and I gave it to him in a box like a gift, because it was leading up to Christmas time. We found out it was on the 5th of December. So I said, oh, I've got an early Christmas present for you. Here, open this. And it was great. He was just as shocked, I think, as what I was. Even though it's what you're wanting and you're praying for it to happen, you don't always expect it. And he made me do another test, because again we were both in a lot of disbelief, which was it was just an amazing feeling, and we were in such a bubble that whole time. But at the same time, you try not to get your hopes up, and you try not to kind of get too excited, because anything can happen. And because we found out so early, it was then kind of like, yes, we are pregnant, but we still just need to be cautious. But it didn't take away any of the excitement or the future planning, and it was just, we were just so happy. The way that they kind of date pregnancy is a little bit strange, and I didn't really understand this until I really looked into trying to conceive and pregnancy and all that sort of stuff. But they actually date your pregnancy from the first day of your last period. So obviously you have a few weeks there where you're on your period, and it's before you've ovulated, so you aren't actually pregnant in that time, but it's counted that you've been pregnant from the first day of your last period, which is a little bit confusing. But I think they do that because not everybody knows when they ovulate, and then it means that everybody is on the same time scale. And obviously when they measure baby and everything, it's at a steady rate. this also meant that we then went for our 12-week scan, and it was a little bit later than 12 weeks. I was 13 weeks to the day actually that we had our scan. But then when I went and had the scan and they actually dated me at 14 weeks, so I was actually a week further along than what I had initially thought. I think, again, this is possibly because of my ovulation is at a slightly different time and I've got shorter cycles, so maybe it pushed me along further. I'm not entirely sure, but that was really lovely for us to be an extra week along, and obviously that's pushed our due date closer as well, which is amazing. So it was just fantastic having that scan and seeing the baby wriggling around and moving, so energetic, and I didn't expect the baby to be moving that much, but it really was, which was just amazing to see. And it was the most surreal, overwhelming, emotional experience, and I'm so lucky and feel so blessed that Tom was able to be there with me, because I know that during COVID and during the pandemics, it's only recently that partners have now been allowed to attend scans, and I couldn't imagine actually going into that without Tom by my side. It was just an experience that we both needed to share. And we were both so nervous before the scan, because it is nerve-wracking. You can obviously book early sort of private scans, which we didn't. We thought about it, but we then decided we'd just wait for our 12-week. But obviously this is the first time seeing our baby, and the first time someone's actually saying to you, everything is fine, and having that reassurance. But it means that you are, well, we were super excited, but so nervous before the scan. Neither of us could sleep. But once you then have that, everything's fine, baby looks healthy, and that relief, and for us to be an extra week along was just amazing as well. So now moving on to symptoms. Like I said, we found out around 4 weeks. It might have been more 5 weeks. Obviously we've now been dated a little bit further along, so it might have been nearer 5. Between 4 and 5 weeks we found out. And at that point, that sort of week before and during sort of about a week and a half in total, and the week sort of for the week before, I had a lot of lower back pain, which at the time I didn't think was any sort of sign of pregnancy. It's kind of like that low, dull, lower back ache, like a dull pain, and I tend to get that when I'm due on my period or when I am on my period. So I actually didn't think anything of it. I just thought, oh, my back's a bit sore. But now, looking back, I think that possibly that was one of my earliest signs of pregnancy, and it would have started around the time of conception. So I think that was probably one of my first signs. I'd also been really quite bloated. I remember the day I found out, I kind of looked down and I thought, actually, I do feel really bloated. We were going out that evening for a meal for our first wedding anniversary, and I had actually been trying outfits on the day before, and I was thinking, none of this looks nice, it doesn't fit properly, because I felt so bloated. But because I have IBS and I bloat quite badly anyway, I didn't really think anything of it. Obviously there's a little niggle in the back of my mind thinking, oh, maybe it's pregnancy related, but it just didn't really come to the forefront of my mind and occur to me that actually this is a symptom until after obviously I had the positive test, and I was like, oh, okay, this is probably why I've had backache and why I've felt so bloated. I also did have a little bit of bleeding around this time, so it was probably about a week after we found out that we were pregnant. I then had, maybe not even quite a week, I then had some bleeding, which was obviously quite alarming and worrying. It wasn't a lot, and when I phoned the midwife, they reassured me. Well, the midwife who I spoke to wasn't actually that reassuring. She was a little bit sharp with me. I think it's probably because they have people phone up all the time over worrying mothers, especially like first time mums. You worry about everything. So I phoned them up and they basically said it is just old blood. It sounds like old blood. Obviously, if you continue to bleed and there's more bleeding and it's bright red, then call us back and we'll get you in for kind of like to see someone or for an emergency scan. But it was literally only a tiny bit and it did pass within a day or two. But obviously it is really worrying, and nobody at this point knew that we were pregnant. We weren't telling anyone yet. We were actually waiting for Christmas to tell our parents. So that was scary, but like I said, within a couple of days that passed. I then did have some more bleeding a few weeks later. Now we told our parents around like Christmas Day, and sort of a week after that I then had some bleeding. So probably around 7 or 8 weeks I then had some more bleeding. Again, spoke to the midwife, said the same thing. It is just, you know, we don't know why. Some people do bleed. It's probably just, it sounds like old blood. If it's not bright red, then don't worry. I also obviously turned to Google and did some Googling. Initially, the first bleed I had could have been like implantation bleeding. It could just be the changes in your hormones. It could be so many different things, but both times obviously I was reassured by the midwife, and fingers crossed, and so far everything has been fine. But it does really worry you when you wipe and there's blood. It does. But Tom was really reassuring as well, and we were both just trying to stay positive and make sure that we weren't letting it stress us out too much, and it turned out it was nothing to worry about. As of around probably 6 weeks, I then started to feel really nauseous. It did start off coming in waves, so I wouldn't feel horrendous all the time. It would sort of come in waves. I'd feel sick and then I'd feel better again. But as we progressed into the first trimester, I was just feeling nauseous all day, every day. And that also then changed my eating habits drastically. I was using, I actually did some more Googling, and people were speaking about sort of like seasickness bands to help with the sickness. So I actually bought some of them and used them. I don't really know if they helped or not. I think they probably did a little bit. It might be a little bit of a placebo effect, but I think they probably did help ease it slightly, but I just didn't ever really take them off. I just kept them on all the time. And I think when I did take them off, I did feel worse. So, I mean, if you're feeling really awful and feeling sick, give them a go. I mean, it's worth a try. But like I said, my eating then really changed. So I felt hungry all the time, like super, super hungry, but I didn't fancy anything. All I would really eat is kind of like toast, dry biscuits, the odd kind of like bagel here and there, a packet of crisps, something like that. And I was actually really craving fruit, and fruit juice. So those were the kind of things that I was surviving off in those first few weeks, few months really. My sickness was definitely worse when I was hungry. So I was trying to eat sort of little and often. They kind of tell you that as well to help reduce the sickness, and try not to get too full, because then that can make you feel really ill as well. So it's kind of finding that balance. But in the ways of kind of like, you know, having a burger for tea or something like that, I just didn't ever fancy anything. But once I had eaten, I did then feel better for a little while. Tiredness played a massive part as well. You know, I just felt absolutely exhausted throughout my first trimester. And again, nobody really knew at this point, so it's hard to kind of keep this all under wraps when you're feeling so rubbish and feeling so tired. I was literally probably napping every single day. Once it got to about between 3 and 5 p.m, I was feeling really sick. I think it was down to the fact that I was just getting tired. So I made sure I then had a nap around that time. I'd wake up feeling a little bit better. I'd then have something to eat, and the evenings tended to be a little bit better. But it was still kind of, the nausea never left. It was always there. I did also start to have a few headaches as well, which is kind of normal for me anyway, because I kind of suffer with headaches and migraines. But being pregnant, you can't take anything for them. The most you can take is paracetamol, and to be honest, I was really trying not to take it, and if I did, I would try and take the smallest dose possible and, you know, only take one, and I would just sleep. Make sure I was drinking lots. I was drinking loads of water. I was really craving water. I went completely off squash. I even needed like fresh fruit juice or water. So that was kind of what I was drinking the whole time. I was just making sure I was staying hydrated, because that obviously really helps with the sickness and the headaches. Drinking water also really helped me with my stomach pain. So like I mentioned earlier, I suffer quite a lot from IBS and bloating. So sipping on water really helped that. During pregnancy, your digestive system slows right down, which I think could cause anybody problems, but let alone that I suffer with IBS and things like that anyway. That combined was really not fun. I had a lot of stomach pain and everything completely slowed down and just completely stopped the flow. So I spoke to my midwife, and she basically was recommending me to possibly change my vitamins. So initially I was on these Pregnacare vitamins, which is like a multivitamin, which has your folic acid and everything. I was actually taking folic acid before we conceived. They recommend to take it at least sort of 3 months before you even start trying to conceive, and to take it the whole way through, up until you then become pregnant. You can then continue to take folic acid, or you can take like a multivitamin. I was actually taking a multivitamin before I fell pregnant of trying to conceive. It was like a 7C's trying for a baby, again like a multivitamin, because I just felt personally, for me, it would just give us a better chance and to make sure I was getting everything that I needed. So I was on that, and then when I found out I was pregnant, I bought a few of these because they were on offer. They're really expensive though, but like I said, I bought these on offer. But when I then spoke to, I think it was the doctor I actually spoke to, she said that because those multivitamins have iron in, that can actually slow your digestive system down even more and stop things from moving. So if you are having problems, then you're best to just switch to just pure folic acid without the iron. So I then switched to this folic acid. I just got this from Tesco's, and since swapping them out, I've actually noticed a really big difference, and I'm really glad I did that. So I'm now just taking this, and I'm not taking the multivitamin, and that has really helped me. I really liked the multivitamin, the fact that I was getting all the extra vitamins that I needed throughout my pregnancy, especially when you're not eating as much of a balanced diet. But I just know that I feel so much better on just the folic acid without the iron in it. It might be that I can go back to those further along, but midwife has said this is perfectly fine. These are so much cheaper as well, like ridiculously cheaper than the Pregnacare anyway. So I'm going to stick to those because they're just making me feel so much better, which is great. Throughout my first trimester, like I said, I was tired and I wasn't feeling great, so exercise really wasn't a main priority for me. I have made sure that I've been going on like daily walks, and I have been doing little bits of like light exercise. So I've been doing like some pregnancy yoga on YouTube, and just some really like low impact first trimester workouts. But I haven't been exercising anywhere near as what I was pre-pregnancy. I just have not felt up to it. I just haven't felt like I could. I'd have no energy, and it's a completely different type of no energy. I've been tired before, but the exhaustion is just, it's just mad. Also, I had more sort of lower back pain. That kind of came back. It eased off for a while. It then came back a bit later on, probably around 8 to 10 weeks maybe. And this kind of pain was lower back pain, and it would then kind of go into like the top part of my bottom, and it would kind of seize up. It would be more so if I was bending over, say like if I was cleaning and hoovering the sofa or something. When I then stood up, I'd have like this sharp spasm. I don't know if it was sciatica or if it's just sort of lower back pain. I know it hurt. But again, that kind of disappeared quite quickly. It kind of comes and goes, but it's not a constant symptom, and I haven't had it in a little while actually. I definitely found the yoga and things like that helped also ease that pain, and that could also help. Sorry, the bin lorry's outside. movement also helped my digestive system and helped kind of get things going in that sense as well. So I really tried to make sure I was getting some sort of movement to help me in that. Like I mentioned earlier, I was obviously bloated quite early on, and that bloat just stayed the whole way through. But I think around 12 to 13 weeks was when I started showing more so, and it being more of a proper baby bump. It started to get a little bit harder as well, and definitely harder to hide. I think it is still a mixture of bloat and bump, but I think around 12 to 13 weeks was when I started properly sort of showing more. And obviously when I then went for my scan, I was in 14 weeks, sorry. So I've definitely started to show more from then, and baby is growing really quickly from the start when it was just like a grain of salt to now it's the size of an avocado. And I think from now on it's just going to grow really quickly and rapidly, which is just so amazing to watch and experience. Now I've entered my second trimester. I'm definitely into my second trimester now. My symptoms, a lot of those symptoms that I've mentioned have eased. Not completely gone. There are still times where I feel sick, and I have now started to get different symptoms, but I have definitely got more energy. Not completely, and I still do get tired, but not quite the same as before, and my sickness has definitely eased. I'm not having to wear the sickness bands now. Yes, so I no longer need to wear the sickness bands anymore. That's definitely eased. It is kind of now back in waves occasionally. Some days are better than others, but like I said, it has definitely eased off, and I'm hoping that it will continue that way through the rest of my pregnancy. So I think that is everything for me to talk about in this first trimester video. I hope that you found it interesting and it helps you if you're trying to conceive, or if you're trying for a baby, or you're just interested in my experience. Everybody is completely different though, so just because this has happened to me doesn't mean that everyone will be exactly the same. But like I said, I thought this would be really nice for me to document, for me to look back on, and for even baby to look back on. And because it is obviously the first time I've ever been pregnant, it's all really new and exciting, and it's just one of those things that I want to cherish forever, and I know it will go so quickly. Like so many people have said to me that it will just fly by, and I'm really trying to make the most of it and really soak up everything that is going on, the good and the bad. I can quickly show my bump. Like I said, I am 15 weeks today, so baby is the size of an avocado. I also do think it's a mixture of bloat and a bump. I do feel like I have quite a big bump already, but like I said, I don't think it's all baby. Also, I thought I'd mention I have been taking measurements kind of off my stomach and weighing myself. I haven't actually put on much weight at all. I think it's probably because my eating was very sporadic in this first trimester, so I wasn't kind of eating my normal. But I think I've literally only kind of put on a few pounds here and there. I think it's totally normal to put weight on, and you can Google exactly, and your midwife will keep an eye on everything, because they weigh you every time they see you, so they will obviously know the weight that you're gaining is, if that's sort of normal for you and your body. But obviously I am going to gain weight. I feel like I have put weight on everywhere. I feel like I've put it on in my face, obviously around my stomach, like my hips, my legs, my boobs, all of that has definitely grown, but actually on the scales I haven't put as much on as I was initially thinking I would, because obviously even though I haven't been eating normally, I have been hungry, so I have been kind of eating when I'm hungry, which is more so than before pregnancy, but I have been eating little amounts more often. So I don't know, that's just something that I'm tracking, and I'm just seeing how that goes. And I have got a little book actually that my mum got me, so not only am I doing the written diary and I was obviously doing the video diaries, I've also been doing this, it's like a pregnancy journal which you can fill in, and it has loads of different stuff in there, so it kind of asks questions, and you can record like when you first wore maternity clothes, you can record your weight, and the measurements of your stomach and all of that sort of stuff in there. So if I can find it, I'll pop the link in the description box, because it's such a nice thing, and like my mum said, it's so nice to have to look back on. So I've been filling that in as well. She gave that to me pretty quickly after she found out that we were pregnant, because it then meant that I could fill it in as early as possible. Some things I had to kind of remember and go back and fill in. But I would really recommend doing something like that, just so you can look back on it, and also your baby can when they're older. I think I would find it interesting anyway to look back. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will now show you the bump. So this is the bump. I hope you can see okay. Like I said, I am around kind of 15 weeks, but I think some of this is baby, some of this is bloat. But yeah, you can definitely see that something is happening now, and it is definitely getting really hard to hide. So I'm so happy that we've told everybody now. I am wearing maternity leggings. They are a little bit big still, they've got a little bit more room to fill, but I'm wearing maternity leggings because they're just so much more comfortable. I find having something across my stomach really painful, and just really, really uncomfortable. So having the maternity leggings is a definite must. They go up really high as well, but I just find them so much more comfortable and so much better. I have had to buy a few bigger things just to make sure that they fit. I'm trying not to buy too much maternity stuff. I'm just trying to buy some things in bigger sizes so I can wear it after pregnancy as well. But some things I have just had to buy maternity. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this interesting. I didn't bore everyone to death, but I hope that it was kind of helpful to at least someone, and that you've enjoyed watching. And if you want to see more of our journey and follow me through my first pregnancy and becoming a mum, then please like and subscribe. I'm going to be trying to upload videos along the journey, so if that's something that you're interested in, then definitely keep an eye out on my channel for a few more videos. But yeah, as I said, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time.